Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're completely dismantling the myths about how real wealth is actually built and maintained in America right now. If you've ever thought that becoming a millionaire requires a massive inheritance, a lucky lottery ticket, or launching a tech startup that goes public overnight, well, you're going to want to pay very close attention. We're diving into the hard data and research from financial experts who have studied the actual day-to-day habits of self-made millionaires and happy retirees. Here's our roadmap for today. First, the self-made reality. Then, 4 paths to true wealth, followed by daily habits for financial freedom. After that, we'll hit the roadblocks to riches, and finally, how to stay a millionaire once you get there.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the self-made millionaire reality. Get ready for a massive paradigm shift. You know, when researcher Tom Carley spent 5 years studying 177 self-made millionaires, what he found was absolutely wild. A staggering 0% inherited their wealth, literally zero. 59% grew up in middle-class households, and 41% actually came from poverty. So we can go ahead and toss out that old narrative that your financial future is purely dictated by the circumstances of your birth. These folks didn't treat their comfort as a finish line, and they sure didn't let poverty hold them back. They treated their starting point as a launch pad, proving that where you start does not dictate where you finish.
And look, achieving this kind of wealth is highly attainable. According to a recent Federal Reserve survey, there are now a record 16 million millionaire households in the U.S. That is 12% of all American families. And here's the kicker. This emerging group of new millionaires aren't pulling in millions a year in salary. Nope, they typically earn somewhere between $150,000 and $250,000. They're college educated, they own their homes, and they are just incredibly consistent investors. Wealth is quietly growing all around us.
Moving on to Section 2, 4 paths to true wealth.
So the data proves there's a route for literally everyone, and it really comes down to your unique personality. If you're a bit risk-averse, the saver investor path might be your jam, saving 20% of your income and investing it prudently. But hey, maybe you're super competitive. Then you could be a big company climber, biting your way right up to the executive suite. If you love diving deep into knowledge, you can become a virtuoso, an absolute master in a highly paid field. Or, if you've got a really high tolerance for stress and risk, you can take the dreamer or entrepreneur path. Choosing the path that actually matches your personality is step 1.
Now, time is a massive factor when you're choosing your route. The dreamer path, that can generate wealth the fastest, averaging just 12 years. But remember, it is incredibly stressful and risky. The virtuoso and climber paths usually take about 2 decades. Meanwhile, the lower-risk saver route takes an average of 32 years. It's the safest path for sure, but man, it demands some serious patience. And this brings us to why passion actually matters on a purely financial level. Get this, out of the wealthy individuals studied, 86% said they liked their jobs, and it took them 32 years to hit $3.4 million. But what about the 7% who absolutely loved their work? They amassed an astonishing $7.4 million in just 12 years. I mean, wow. Loving what you do doesn't just make you happier. It practically acts as a multiplier for your wealth and totally slashes the time it takes to build it.
All right, let's dive into Section 3, daily habits for financial freedom.
You really have to understand the vast difference between being cheap and being frugal. Being cheap is just buying poor quality stuff that breaks down and ends up costing you way more in the long run. Frugality, on the other hand, is all about maximizing your long-term value. Take Cornelius Vanderbilt, one of the richest men in history. He saved absolute fortunes simply by stripping the decorative brass off his newly acquired trains. People thought he was crazy, but removing that brass eliminated the daily, recurring expense of paying brass polishers, which saved massive amounts of money over time. Focus on quality first, cost second.
To actually execute this, the wealthy follow a very specific, actionable spending playbook. To pull off the saver investor path, you've got to live well below your means. We're talking keeping housing under 25% of your net pay. Cars, clothing, and vacations, keep each of those under 5%. And entertainment stays under 10%. They bargain shop, they use coupons, and they steer completely clear of gambling. And look, this isn't about depriving yourself, it's about taking control so you actually have capital left over to invest. And that brings us to the logical progression of what experts call dream setting. You can't just say, I want to be rich. That's a dream, not a goal. First, you blueprint your ideal future 10 years from now. Second, you pinpoint the specific dreams within that vision. Third, you build 100% achievable goals around each of those dreams. And finally, step 4, you create the daily habits required to actually hit those goals. It forces you to take this fuzzy, vague vision and drill it all the way down to what you're literally going to do today.
Because true wealth requires a millionaire routine. So, what do these daily habits actually look like? Well, 88% of the wealthy read for self-improvement for at least 30 minutes a day. They cap their TV time at under an hour. They exercise daily because optimal brain function is an absolute must for spotting opportunities. Plus, 94% of them strictly filter their words and emotions. They know that losing their temper can instantly destroy a lucrative relationship. And finally, they maintain a relentlessly open-minded and positive outlook. Fun fact, positivity actually boosts your brain's prefrontal cortex, which helps you see solutions where everyone else just sees problems.
When it comes to earning potential, it's all about having several pools in several ponds. The wealthy almost never rely on a single paycheck. In fact, 65% of millionaires create 3 or more streams of income. Whether that's real estate rentals, stock market investments, or a side hustle, diversifying your income means that if one stream suddenly dries up during an economic downturn, you aren't left stranded.
Okay, let's flip the script. Section 4, Roadblocks to Riches.
There is a super stark contrast between good goals and bad goals. Good goals, like, say, losing 20 pounds or growing a side business, those build your long-term value and yield lasting happiness. Bad goals, on the other hand, that's like working insane overtime solely to buy a shiny new Ferrari. It completely consumes your valuable time and resources for just a fleeting moment of joy. Once that new car smell fades, you're just left with less time for your family and way less capital to invest.
And honestly, a dangerous mindset gap is one of the biggest roadblocks out there. When researchers looked at the groups struggling financially, nearly 90% actually believed the wealthy just inherited their money, and another 90% blamed fate for their own circumstances. And because they felt totally out of control, 77% regularly played the weekly lottery, just crossing their fingers for random luck. Giving in to these limiting beliefs, it acts like a massive emergency brake on your potential. The wealthy, conversely, believe they create their own opportunity luck through sheer hard work and persistence.
Now, here is a roadblock that catches a lot of folks off guard: over-supporting adult children. The data from happy retirees shows they support their adult kids by less than $500 a month on average. But the unhappy retirees, they are shelling out between $700 and $2,000 a month. You are literally 4 times more likely to be an unhappy retiree if you're financially carrying your adult children to that extreme. It totally drains your retirement resources. And honestly, it often just delays your kid's own career development.
Which brings us to our final chapter, Section 5, Staying a Millionaire.
All right, here is the core, inescapable truth of this entire explainer. It is such a common trap to think that once you hit that magic $1 million mark, you can just pull all your money out, stuff it in a mattress, and be totally safe forever. Nope, you simply cannot preserve your purchasing power over decades of retirement without continuing to invest.
And this right here is exactly why balancing your risk is absolutely necessary. Think about a hypothetical retiree who started back in 1990 with a cool $1 million, withdrawing $40,000 a year adjusted for inflation. Over 25 years, if they rolled it all into one-year treasuries, they practically ran out of money, ending up with just $62,000. If they magically locked in a fixed 4.5% rate, they dropped to $744,000. But the retiree who stayed invested in a standard 60-40 stocks and bonds portfolio, after 25 years of constantly taking money out, they actually grew their wealth, finishing with over $1.2 million.
So, to keep your wealth, you've got to maintain the exact same mindset that got you there in the first place. The millionaires next door preserve their wealth by prioritizing true financial independence over flashy status symbols. They really don't need a private jet to feel successful, you know? They foster independent children. They actively avoid toxic relationships by building a super optimistic, success-minded inner circle, and above all else, they never, ever quit.
To wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought. You've seen the hard data. The whole privilege myth? Totally busted. The daily habits are laid out right in front of you. So, now that you know the real truth about how self-made wealth is actually built and maintained today, which playbook are you going to execute starting right now?